All right, everyone. It's the top of the hour, and I'm going to go ahead and kick us off so that we can start on time and end on time, if not early. Happy Wednesday. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and universally mute the line so that we don't get any feedback from those joining.
The leader has muted your line. To unmute your line, press #6.
All right. Just wanted to get that little logistical item out of the way. So welcome to you. Welcome to the webinar on the formula for productivity, how it all adds up. My name is Paige Webb. Many of you might have participated in a Getting the Edge class that I've led, or another one of my colleagues has. My time at the Effective Edge has literally transformed my personal productivity, but also that as a team member. Being a part of the Effective Edge, we live our work by integrating all the practices into our work and life. We're also a team, just like many of you are, and that is very different from a group of individuals just working together. Having the methodologies and clear expectations and outcomes has created certainty and trust that my team will be there for me and that I can be there for them because I'm not overwhelmed and buried in my own work. Of course, there are different sides of the spectrum, different days of the month, but and the reality is we've all got each other's back. So I'm very excited about today and sharing some of our best practices as well as learning from you as to what is happening with you and your organization. During our time, we'll be posting questions and polls to learn more about you and your concerns as we move through the hour. And we'll also post the poll results as Christina speaks to each topic. And I'll want to mention that each poll response is completely anonymous. And if you do have a question that you'd like answered, simply type it into the chat window to the left-hand side of the screen and address it to the presenters. I will be moderating that throughout the course of the hour. So what I'd like to do now is put a poll up in the room. I want you to think about what's going on in your world. Think about your team. I want you to identify, if you could please, in this poll, what is your single largest team struggle? So if you've got a small monitor or a small resolution, you might have to scroll through that list. But we definitely want to hear from you about the current struggles in your world. Once you're done contributing to that one, I have another question for you. Which team collaboration tools are in use in your organization? What are you trying to make sense of the world with? All right, it looks like we've got some responses coming across the board, and I'll be revealing those in a second. All right, so as everyone's contributing there, I'll introduce our speaker. Christina Randle is the founder and CEO of the Effective Edge. She'll be guiding us today in our hour-long time together. For over 16 years, the Effective Edge has provided executive productivity coaching and training to large and fast-moving organizations, providing relief at the individual professional level, synergies at the team level, and stronger results in healthier organizations throughout. So at this time, I'm going to minimize the polls. We'll be coming back to those a little later, as I like to call the big reveal, if you're a Biggest Loser fan. And in our time together, our intention is to provide you with ideas and tools that you can readily implement at the individual and team level that are practical and highly likely to impact the way you and your organizations get work done. If you participated in a Getting the Edge class over the course of 8 hours, think about how much you were transformed. And that's what motivated us to take our programs and all of our offerings to the next level. In the last 15 minutes, we'll be sharing with you many case studies on how we have solved these challenges in organizations similar to yours and also answer questions that you might have. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Christina.
Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm guessing that most of you have attended one of our programs, Getting the Edge, or another program, Starting with the Edge. And I really want to start by just saying thank you. Thank you for your participation. Many of you have been champions for us in our organization, inside of your organization, and we really are grateful for that. we have learned from each and every one of you and from your organizations and are now bringing that knowledge base full circle to help all of us reach new levels of effectiveness. So we have a large and diverse group today. We've got technology, food, aerospace, banking, education, telecommunications, and even a church. And so thank you very much for all being here. In our time together, not only do we want to be a resource for you, but we also want you to be a resource for each other as we sort of peer into and investigate what I call the formula for productivity. Our journey here at the Effective Edge has mirrored the journey that I hear from many of you. What we have personally seen and experienced is a deep and what I call profound increase in uncertainty, complexity, chaos, just how fast things are changing and how fast things are happening. Not only is our big world changing, but there are also many changes happening within many of our organizations, which impacts our communities, which also is rippling down into our personal lives. And this change is bringing some unique challenges, but it's also bringing some very unique opportunities. So as what we noticed as work and technology merge together and yet get more complex, working as teams is really coming to the forefront. The question of how do teams have to come together? How do they leverage technology and make sure that they deliver and drive results, not only as teams, as managers, but also as organizations? We've discovered that, and what we know is that we've got to respond to these demands, and that's going to require us shifting how we've always thought that we would work. And it's shifting some of our basic fundamental thoughts and ideas about how we work together. It's going to require us to work collaboratively, to be informed much more so than ever before, and pretty much the pace is going to increase. And yet, at all of that, we need to be grounded in technology. It's going to also require us to have a deep understanding of not only the concept of what team is, but being aware of how we make contributions to the teams that we're on, but also how we limit, in other words, how our behaviors can actually get in the way of how teams communicate. And one of the real elements that's on the table right now is how we are wired for competition, and we're wired to keep information close to our chest and not show it to other people. In this, what we might call the new world, and how things are coming, that all is going to be shifting. You all experienced in our Getting the Edge program, or really any of our Edge courses, we bring together we think it's very practical and integrated solution. We bring a set of thought processes. In other words, how do I have to make decisions about all those, if you remember the slide, 225 new inputs of information that come at me every day? And then how do I make sure I leverage my tool so that it really does serve me? You might remember Microsoft Outlook does not come as a productivity tool. Lotus Notes does not come as a productivity tool. So how do we really shift it so that it is? And what are the key set of behaviors that I need? What are the practices that I need to do to ensure that my systems are fresh and relevant? Having this integrated system really does begin to be the entry point for how we work together as a team. We need that strong integrated solution so that all of the commitments that we've made, whether they're individual commitments, commitments to our family and friends, commitments to our community, or commitments to team members, are kept in a place where they are trusted and where not only we can deliver the right thing at the right time with relaxed control, but our team members, as Paige really brilliantly said at the beginning, where she can be trusted and counted on to also deliver as well. So it's more than just the tool. It's really deeply creating clarity many organizations that we're working with have discovered that they don't have a lot of clarity, whether at the team level, what a team specifically is doing, or at the organizational level, where's the organization going. There's also not a very deep, if at all, agreement about how they're going to work together. So then there's very little conversation about what tool they're going to use to make sure that they can deliver the clearly stated outcome in terms of how they agreed that things were going to work. So as we shift, we need to make sure that these core elements are part of any team activity that we take on. I don't know about you, but I've certainly seen some teams over the past come together with relatively little effort and deliver some amazing results. And I've also seen teams really implode. And I've seen organizations sort of attempt to try to massage or manipulate that to solve the problem by maybe teaching them conceptual training about how to work together as a team. Maybe through providing some situations or some scenario in which they learn, typically in a classroom. Well, we have some interesting feedback. And our research now says that that's shifting. And teams want to, one, they don't have time, and they need to gain faster traction. The way that they own their learning more deeply is when they learn doing something that's real and meaningful, like their work. So we've learned that we need to integrate not only what they're learning, but use real examples, meaning their real life, just like in our Getting the Edge course, we used your real email to actually deliver results. Not only do they want to do that, but they want to learn something practical and take that practicalness, the structure, the processes, and the things that they've learned, the new awarenesses, onto the new teams and new projects so that they can deliver even more accelerated results. In our time, I want to make sure that we provide you with some readily and usable best practices. Now, we're on the journey of team and collaboration like most of you are. But here's what we've learned so far. And I'd like so let's look at that team struggle page. So it looks like a variety of you are just sort of a wide variety are having just a little bit of lots of different things. With the biggest thing, as I see, is 30% are spending a lot of time just getting status updates. So we have figured out at least some about how to make sure that that works for us as a team, and I'll show you what we use to do that. So that's very helpful, so thank you, Paige, for that. So I asked the question, what's getting in the way of teams working together? So clearly my notes match the notes that we just had. So one is having meetings to get updates. That's a huge amount of time. If it's an hour a day, that's even really more significant and more than we have time for. We're also emailing documents to each other back and forth. We might be updating documents that aren't even the latest or the most relevant. We're asking questions, pinging each other on IM, or sending emails, or making phone calls, or having meetings to get updates on projects. Moving forward, we need quick access. We need quick answers, regardless of time zone, regardless of where people are. And we need to be able to leverage the tools to make sure that we're getting what we need. Some of us, we're also learning from our clients, are reluctant to change their systems. Maybe what they have does not work, but at least it's familiar. So one of the things we've learned is that we need to help people pave the way to shift from being individuals that are on a team to working as a team and using the technology to get them there. Technologies, including things like SharePoint, they bring their unique set of challenges. They also are the best tool that we've discovered anyway, knowing that no tool is perfect. SharePoint provides value that I don't think that when we looked at SharePoint, it wasn't readily available readily apparent what was included in that tool. And there was lots of instructions on how to use, the different tweaks or different bells and whistles on it. But that's not where the true value came in. So many organizations, from our perspective, and when we go in and see how people are using tools, and particularly even using SharePoint, they're leaving money on the table by not being able to take full advantage of the tools. Another thing that's happening is some of us thought that the Gen X's and the Gen Yers, they were going to know how to use these tools. So we'll just push them out. We won't do any training on them, and the younger generation will just take over. Well, what we've learned, and maybe you've had some experience with this too, is that they know how to post a Facebook status update, but they don't really have a lot of experience really understanding how teams come together to deliver a result. In some of the organizations we've worked with, we've noticed that some are actually just forcing people flat out, we're going to remove your mailbox, we're going to reduce your mailbox sizes, you can't have PST folders, and it's going to force you to use SharePoint. Well, SharePoint is designed as a collaboration tool. So the last thing you want to do is take a collaboration tool and make it a must-do. They're also putting constraints on giving people the real experience and the real access that they need. Most of our participants want to know how to use these tools, but they're very selfish about it. How do I use these new tools in this new time so that I become more effective? They want to know, if I invest in these tools, can you help walk me through? And unlike Microsoft Outlook, people don't have to use SharePoint. They can live in their Microsoft Outlook. And I think the times are coming where that could actually be dangerous for an organization, because so much of what we do is going to be required to be a team effort. When it comes to using technology, I'm of the mind that form follows function. So I'm not a person that carries a hammer and thinks it's going to be the perfect tool for every situation that comes up. So Christy and Russell are team members of mine here at the Effective Edge, and last year we purchased a new learning management system. And they, along with quite a few others, worked on getting this system and the templates designed, so setting it up, getting the infrastructure set up, all the processes, getting our old system integrated and ready for our customers. Similar to projects that your organizations might take on. Our timeline was short, and because we had people in multiple time zones, multiple locations, doing multiple accountabilities, we chose SharePoint. So it was a perfect team scenario. And the team began by taking the following steps. And I posted them because we've considered them to be best practices, that they preferably happen in this order, but at least they all happen. So the first thing that Christy and Russell did was clarified what's the outcome. And when I say outcome, you might remember from the Getting the Edge, it's when we're both there, when we're all there standing at the end. What will it look like, feel like? What will people be saying? So it's not just a goal. It's actually much more than a goal. So it included the key deliverable, which was getting the project up and running by the due date, and wowing the customer, which is a core value here at the Effective Edge. But it also expanded to include the fact that while Christy had more knowledge, ultimately Russell was going to be the subject matter expert. They hadn't worked together directly before, so it gave them an opportunity to have to learn each other's strengths and weaknesses and how both of those came to the project. Once they were clear on the outcome, they determined what tools that they were going to use. And as I mentioned, we had deployed SharePoint, and since they were looking at multiple locations and all the other parameters, they did decide to use it. And here's the outcome. And so I see that a lot of you are using SharePoint, and I'm not sure, some of the things that I say today might be validating what you're currently doing. Some of it might be you could bring a few tweaks to it. And for some of you, you might just decide to throw the baby out with the bathwater and start from scratch. But But here's why, and the value, the strength that they were able to receive from using SharePoint. First of all, they were able to create their own site for how the project was going to work. And on that site was all the documents, the links, the resources, the action plan, the intention, so that everybody could, every time they opened up that page, they actually were reminded of all of the critical elements of their project. Another thing that they were able to do is all documents related to that project were set there. That way, when they went to update documents, they always knew that they had the latest version, and they could manage version control if they needed. Another thing is when they put all their actions, when they entered all their actions there, not only could they see what the forward progress that they were making, but if I needed to see how they were doing, I didn't have to make a phone call to them. So it didn't matter if they were in South Africa or France or Latin America or here right under my nose. I could actually see them and see their progress. The other, and probably the biggest thing, is no meetings occurred to give updates. They just went to look at the project plan and knew immediately what about the updates. So, and the last thing I'll say is about that is that as they were moving through the project, sometimes you can get, as CEO, we talk about being distracted by bling, what's the latest and greatest, instead of making sure that we complete projects. And so what I noticed for them is the momentum to actually complete the project was there because they were actually clicking things off the list and celebrating their wins. They could actually see the physical list getting shorter and shorter. So since I alluded to this subject of meetings, I'd love to hear what your current best practices are for meetings, whether they're live or virtual. So tell me, do you have a set of best practices for your meetings? And I'll just sit quiet and watch the numbers grow. So a lot of no's and they're there but not followed. So very interesting. So a few of you, getting close to 24%, have them. A small portion are saying, no, we don't. Very nice. So most of you don't have standard practices for virtual meetings or live meetings. So I didn't put a slide in there because I want to be able to have us sort of collaborate. So for those of you that have them, Paige, I'm just going to have you on the spot create just a poll that asks people, can it just be an open, perfect, what are the meeting best practices that they do have? Okay, so I'm going to have you use the chat. Sorry. Wrong tool. That's why she's driving and I'm not. So I'd love to hear from you. What are your best practices? Perfect. So needing an agenda clearly. Meeting starting and ending on time, perfect. So one of our clients recently started a process where they actually have something called 50-minute meetings. And so if it's a 30-minute meeting, it's 25. They call it Mind the Fives. And I really like that. It gives us time to get from one meeting to another. Another really good best practice that we use, if there's somebody remote, then we assume everybody's remote. So the remote people actually get the same level of value and connection. The only meeting we don't do that in is our all-hands meeting on Monday, and we can literally almost forget that somebody's on the phone. And we're really cognizant of it, or I think we would say that we are, but still. So these are great. So mutual respect, I love that one. Making sure that people have the agenda, I really see that. I like Jody thinks have a meeting facilitator, and we actually recommend an action tracker. So somebody who records the actions to make sure that none of them slip through the cracks. Take time to have a check-in, very nicely done. Make sure everybody is mentally there. So really nice input, really nice input. So I'm going to give you, since most of you use SharePoint, I'm going to just show you some practices that we use. And what the takeaway here is how we use them is a combination of the best practice and leveraging the tool. So the first one I want to show you is My Site. And so we've got a partial My Site picture up here. That's my bad. I didn't really download it correctly. But on this page, and what we've noticed is most companies that have SharePoint really don't know that they have this thing called My Site. And what it does, in fact, we just did a class a few weeks ago, and we asked people, where all do you have to go to get all the information that you need? And they got to, just lots. So Paige has put another poll up here, which is how many places do you have to go to get information? And once you've had a chance to fill yours in, I'll give you the feedback that we got from this one organization as we worked with their functional teams on setting up a team site that they work on. So really good. So most of you don't have many places, but I don't know, it's even distracting when I think about going somewhere, in the multiples of tens. So one of the things that that this My Site can be used for is setting up all the key links that you go to. So if you notice in the bottom right, all the links that they access on an ongoing basis are right there, whether it's a document or an internet link. They also have in front of them some key activities that they need to do, and they can also put some general information about them. What's also great about this tool, so two things for me. One is I actually have all my key performance indicators up there, so I don't have to go digging in different Excel reports or sites. I can actually find it right there. The second one is that I actually, if I'm working with somebody outside the organization, typically, not always, you'd have to check with your administrator. This is a great place where vendors can work with you on a project, and you don't have to have this, it doesn't have the same level of security. So that's a really good tool that we found. And the My Site question really does answer the question, how can I use SharePoint and be selfish? I want to grow my own productivity and effectiveness before I consider growing the team. So the next practice I'm going to talk to you about is workspaces. And you see up here what's called the GEM, which is the name we give our all-hands meeting, which happens on Monday morning. And what this allows us to do is, so what used to occur was we would mail an agenda. And then people would respond and say, oh, no, but I wanted to add another agenda item. So then we would re-mail the agenda. And before SharePoint, that was the typical way. Also, there would have to be somebody who recorded the action items and what happened in the meeting, and that would have to be distributed out to everybody. And then typically a call would happen with whoever wasn't able to be at the meeting, and we would have to update them. So all of that has now gone away. So what occurs here in this meeting workspace is we have the calendar you'll see on the left of all of our current meetings, future meetings, and past meetings. You also see where there's attendance. There's an agenda, and anybody can come in here and add the agenda. Now, I own the meeting, so before the meeting, I'll go in and maybe reduce the amount of time or add something or take something off if I talk to somebody. But that's the idea is I'm not having to do that all week long, people emailing me saying, can you add this to the agenda? On the right and to the bottom are 4 boxes that I want to talk to you about. One is called links. So if we visit with, if we review or visit a document on a recurring basis or a link, we just put it right there in links. And the framework for the agenda and the links, as well as the actions and decisions, which are the other two elements, they travel with the agenda week to week. So we can also, as we're having the meeting, we record the actions in the moment. We review them at the end of the meeting, and then everybody disperses and goes and gets work done. The other thing that's very helpful is that there's decisions there, and we record the decisions. So if somebody says, we don't remember, or I don't remember when that happened, or did we really decide that, we actually have a history. So that's been very helpful for us. And what it's done is forced us to change how we work together. So instead of working kind of in this disjointed, and I send an email to Paige and that adds work to her, now I just go and put it right on the agenda. So hopefully, if you're not using that and not using that to this fullest, that will be helpful for you. It's also, I spend a lot less time now asking for updates from my team. I spend basically very little to no time getting project updates because it's all here. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about chats. So how many of you use chat, and which one of these do you use? So just take a minute. I'd like to hear from you or see which one that you're using. So I see a big portion right now uses Office Communicator, some Google Chat, some Microsoft Live Meeting, a few Skypes. And if this were a horse race, it looks like Office Communicator is going to take the win, and sure enough, it has. So Office Communicator a lot of times is kind of the tool of choice if you're using the whole Microsoft suite, but by no means is it critical to have that as well as, or that. In fact, we use, as our company culture, we use Skype. And we found that to be a very effective tool because it also does video conferencing and it works really well internationally. But I have to tell you, when we started, when I noticed people were using Instant Messenger, I really was reluctant to allow it, and I was also reluctant to have us create a standard. But then somebody reminded me, oh yeah, don't you set guidelines for tools and then make sure that the tool works for you? And I went, oh yes, that's what we do. So I dove into the deep end of the pool, and we came up with a set of best practices, not only what we had learned from our clients, but also what we had found works. And so just to review these, there are 6 of these best practices. And we use it like we would as if we were going to walk up to that person and talk to them. So the first thing we do is we mute the chime, which if you've ever gotten the chime on Office Communicator, can be relatively loud. So if people are in close proximity, it can really be distracting. So we highly recommend that. The other one is to knock. The next one is to knock. See if that person's available, because they actually may not be. Just because they're sitting at their desk does not mean that they're available for you. The next one is respect their time. And so if you're asking them for their time, making sure that I guess it's setting the right expectation about if they're available or if they're not. The fourth bullet is sometimes we can use chat thinking that because you are talking on a sort of a tool that you don't have to be as professional. And we recommend being professional all the time. Truthfully, we want to be succinct, we want to be clear, but we never know, truthfully, where these messages are going to end up. Somebody just typed in a great message about, well, how do you knock? And I literally will ask somebody, do you have a minute? So I had a conversation with one of my staff yesterday, and I didn't know what they were doing. And, yeah, I'm the boss, and could I pull rank? Yes. But everything they're doing is something on behalf of our company, so I wanted to make sure that they really were available. So that's how I recommend that we check and knock. The next one is don't multitask. If you're not good with having multiple windows open or having multiple conversations, then don't. Let somebody know. That's how that gets handled is when you are checking for availability. And lastly, if you're going to have a conversation with somebody, have a conversation. Either open up a video conference, or if it's long, go into email. The one thing I notice is some people, I say chat is best used for what I call the 2-minute rule. So since most of you have done the Getting the Edge course, it would fall into that do it. So if I can pop Paige a quick note and she can reply to me and all that can happen in 2 minutes, then typically that's what I would recommend. So I hope those have been helpful. I want to shift gears a little bit and move into do some polls. Some case studies. So I brought 2 today for you. And the first one is a consumer foods company. They're very large, and they came to us and had a long list of what they were asking our help in. So they wanted to lessen the mailbox sizes, but they didn't want to put people in a panic mode by reducing them before they gave people an opportunity and help them learn where else. They wanted to create a higher adoption rate of SharePoint. They wanted to increase their meeting effectiveness, and they had a critical initiative that they were rolling out and wanted people to have a high adoption rate. It was critical to the company's success. So we started by providing the Getting the Edge using Microsoft Outlook. We also have that same program for Lotus Notes and for GroupWise. And we have some on-demand modules for the Mac, if any of you are on the Mac or on Outlook 2011. And we tailor that to make sure that the individuals felt success for their individual effectiveness first. So once we provided them with some relief, we transitioned that into how do I make sure I'm effective using SharePoint. So a lot of people don't really understand all the ins and outs, and it can look, in 2007, it can just look unfamiliar, and in 2010, it can just look overwhelming. And so we basically walk them through and help them set up how they can really leverage SharePoint for their own personal effectiveness. And we followed that with taking functional teams, not in-tech teams, but functional teams, and helping them create their own sites for how they were going to be effective together. So that looked at how the site was set up, what the links and resources would be, how they would agree to work together on it, how they would go about having accomplishment, and really how are they going to keep it updated. So by starting with providing these individuals the training on the tool, adoption dramatically increased. So the company had actually tried the carrot and the stick, forcing people, and it had backfired. And so we were able to help them create a great experience, and the end result was achieved. We grew adoption. Professionals didn't experience something being forced on them. And also their biggest concern was about confidentiality, and it worked much better than they thought. The second example I'll show you is an IT company. They're based in Texas, which is where we are, and they were doing a lot of things right in terms of leadership academies and discussion groups and really growing their people and their talent. Their problem was that they wanted to get people to use the tool like SharePoint, but when we went in, we discovered that not only were they using SharePoint, they had 3 separate SharePoint sites They had 4 collaboration and planning tools, including Excel. They had 6 chat tools, 4 video conferencing tools. They were also using text, email, and they were using the Dropbox, which for those of you who may not know is kind of you can go outside and send a big document to anyone, which actually was outside the company firewall, which was outside of policy and creating very high risk for this company. So we were able to facilitate the discussion with their leadership teams and set the best practices for how everybody would use certain tools and get them educated on how to use a tool and get them actually where it made sense for them to use it, not only individually but as a team. So there's a list of all the solutions that we brought to them. So I guess, Paige, what I'd like to have happen now is I'd like to hear if you could just open up a chat. And before we go to Q&A, I really want to hear from them what the value is for these best practices. So were these things that they were – so I guess my first question is, are these the things I've talked about, things that you're already doing? So how do you – are these of value to you, I guess is a real question. Great. So Tim asked a great question, which is how do you ensure and enforce the information on SharePoint is quality added? There is some upfront work. So one of the things that Christy and Russell did, and I'll go back to that example since it's the one I used today, they spent time really creating how they were going to, what they were going to put. So it wasn't somebody doing it to them. They really owned it. And that's really what we have found is an inherent element to success at the team level is people experiencing and having some ownership, some say in it. So that's how we've done it, is making sure that everybody involved understands the true outcome. And a lot of times when the action items aren't being completed on time or the information isn't clear about what people are posting or not, it really comes down to, in our experience, and this may not be yours, that that when they have that ownership, they're more likely, more inclined to actually deliver on the result. Let's see. So, wow, I guess we're going into Q&A. So let's just, so somebody asked if the classes using SharePoint are the same as the classes for getting the edge, and the answer is the model is very much the same. So if you remember, you learned some concepts for being effective individually, and then you learned how to apply those concepts, and then you actually took time to apply those concepts. And that's exactly what we have learned is a really strong and it's sort of what you might call a winning formula for how not only learners learn and create more knowledge, awareness in their organization, but also, what people have told us. So thank you for that question. Let's see. So a person asked about, God, there's so many tools now. How do you set a standard? And I wish I could say, in the old days, I think we could say, well, you get the leadership to align upon a set of tools, and then you force them to only use those tools. I'm going to say that is no longer a way that you can actually do this. So it really is about the specific team that's driving a particular outcome that is going to decide how those tools are most effectively used. I think the days are gone of force and push and demanding and restricting and policy. We're seeing, it's all about, and I hate to use the word alignment because it typically means top-down, but we're just seeing a shift, at the very core shift. So thanks. Great question, Rod. All right, I'm just reading the next question. Let's see. So Dana asked a great question, which is, does someone edit or organize the priorities, say, on the agenda? And the answer is yes. I own that meeting. So everybody can post or add an item to the agenda, which is really great. And then usually Friday afternoons, sort of in preparation as a part of my kind of weekly recharge, or I'm a bright and early Monday morning girl, and so I might be looking at it on them. So definitely I organize it, I edit it, I determine the priority. Peggy has a great question, which is about sharing the desktop for documents via Communicator. One of the reasons we're not on Communicator is because we have such a premier tool. The tool we're using today is Adobe Connect Pro. Because we use it for training and we can do lots of things, we typically do that. If it works, use it. So if Office Communicator is great, then use that. But what we found is we'll bring up SharePoint and then use Adobe Connect to have people view it. So that sounds like a little bit what you're talking about. So that's really great. Want to know how to use SharePoint for collaboration. So the tool SharePoint is like the tool Outlook. It's a tool. And so using it to actually collaborate, it's sort of like asking your Outlook to think for you. So what we're doing is merging how teams come together and collaborate, which literally occurs outside of a tool. Collaboration occurs through getting like-minded people who want to basically work together to deliver or execute on a project. And when the clarity of the outcome is strong, then that typically has people be more inclined to then use SharePoint as the holder of the action items. So when it comes to actually collaborating, it may not be something that can occur at the biggest picture level, but two tools that we use to collaborate, one is discussion boards, and the other is we can use it this way, is wikis. So the discussion boards, really somebody can post, and then lots of people can add to that particular conversation. And then some of us get feeds or kind of get told that stuff is up there. And that's really helped a lot for us. So does the SharePoint calendar provide you reminders like Outlook? You know, that is a great question, Lisa, and I do not know the answer. I don't know if it does directly. What we tend to do is set up RSS feeds, and that's how we use it. So it's not as if somebody else has invited you to an appointment. The good news about the RSS feeds is if anybody assigns me a task in SharePoint or anything else, an announcement, I can pick and choose within a big selection of SharePoint that may have tons and tons of information in it exactly what I want to see. Let's see. All right. So all right, so I've looked at, Cynthia asked a great question, which is how do I keep my KPIs on SharePoint? It's basically a link, and so I can immediately go in and see that link. So as other people are updating, I can actually, no matter what the latest update, I always see the most current, where if I was if I was getting it via email, then I'd have to ask for another later copy, or I'd have to be linked into our private drive, which I don't always have access to. So on my SharePoint, I always have access to that. Okay. So I want to leave you, I'm thinking that was the questions. I think that we've answered them all. If anybody has any other questions, we're going to hang around after we close up, and so feel free to pop the questions in the chat room, or we can have a personal conversation with you. In terms of sharing with you what we've learned so far, so here's what I consider the productivity formula. So individual productivity occurs when an individual has strong systems for how they manage work and life, which is using the integrated solutions. They've got a thinking process, they've got a tool, and they have a set of best practices. But the team formula obviously gets a little bit bigger, which is effective individuals that come together as a team to do meaningful work and leverage tools in the process. So that is what I consider the productivity formula. So the formula starts with individuals that experience success on a day-to-day, and that they can stand strong inside of a team and be trusted inside and out, like Paige was talking about. Every team member has Paige's back, and we all have hers. So with that, there you go. Thank you, Paige. I want to thank you for being with us today. I know there are many places that you could have been during this day, this last hour, and we are grateful that you chose to spend it with us. We hope that you'll stay connected with us as not only we continue the journey, and we know that you'll continue the journey. So I want to leave you, I guess, with my last message, which is you don't have to go this road alone. The landscape that we're operating in, the complexity, the chaos is going to continue to change.